There was nothing like the Galactic Arena. It was ever envisaged by humanity to be a large erected coliseum on a far-off barren globe encircled by nothing but the space is empty for the generations. Had welcomed the cruelest and deadliest competition is a spectacle in the galaxy, where the most powerful warriors come from many extraterrestrial species battled to the huge millions of people watch the death viewers from many realms were all observing the conflicts via sophisticated holographic broadcasts ready for carnage and bloodshed. The warriors were well known around the arena, for many in their galaxy are regarded as gods. Individuals nobody had ever set foot in the arena, and the rest of the world with good cause. Humans in the galaxy were viewed as feeble, brittle, and significantly less superior in compared to the tall extraterrestrial race that, to the spectators, dominated the games. The elite humans of the galaxy were nothing greater than weak beings with restricted technology, and its placelessness in the brutal combatants in the brutal reality of the arena who battled there were frequently physically hideous with genetic improvements or cutting-edge technology armor that gave them near invincibility. The arena across space was not a location for people judged undeserving of the struggle for the notion of a human participating in. Every time the intergalactic arena the subject was brought up in conversation, it was always received with giggles and mockery. Even the strongest, physically overpowering people were nothing compared to the space warriors with the ability to snap a human in half as effortlessly as the games went on. It appeared that humanity would never join the arena, and the majority of people were happy with that and didn't want to pit their might against living things powerful enough to wipe out planets. But today everything was about to shift in the arena. It was full, just as it usually was, with viewers assembling from all air buzzed in a corner of the galaxy thrill as the upcoming group of gladiators ready to combat a galactic conspiracy. The impending fight was extolled by pundits, hinting at a potential new rival's arrival. With excitement, the audience roared, looking forward to the bloodshed that was certainly. But when the presenter presented the following fighter, roar of exhilaration gave way to laughter. The following warrior to enter the ring wasn't a massive extraterrestrial unbreakable armor. A human being, lone person strolling into the armed with nothing heart of the Colosseum, surpassing both his physical attributes and intelligence. The stadium was filled with laughing astronomical pundits, delighted by the sight, accentuated the ridiculousness of a human once they step into the galactic arena, emphasized how frail humans are animals, informing the viewer that this would only serve as a warm-up for the true winners to emerge. Our people warrior alone recognized as the survivor, staying unmoved. He stood at the casually eyeing the arena's entrance, the enormous Colosseum, and the foreign audience that had every right to make fun of him. He was smaller than the other, so chuckle. Rivals devoid of genetic improvements or technological improvements that a lot of his rivals owned. His attire, which was appropriate for fighting, was simple compared to the aliens' high-tech armor. Gladiators seemed to be everywhere around him. To declare openly that one is vulnerable, audience members quickly noticed the laughs increased in volume. But the survivor was unafraid of the group he was with, been preparing for this occasion his whole life. As a mixed martial arts master, battlefield strategies and warfare and survival, he had developed his abilities over innumerable years, getting ready for the moment when he would at last enter the galactic arena. While the extraterrestrials concentrated on brutal strength, he concentrated on speed and agility and accuracy. He recognized that it wasn't always necessary to confront someone. His actual power came from his capacity to consider a few steps in front of his adversaries, making use of their own advantages. The survivor marched in opposition to them. The audience moved deeper into the arena. Laughter grew to a cosmic level. Crowd, he was a walking joke, the irony of a show that was about. They saw him to finish in his swift loss, serving as nothing more than cannon material, delicate, somebody who would be crushed by the real winners of the arena. But the survivor stayed composed, his gaze darting the arena, scrutinizing every detail. He was aware of that to undervalue him would be to the alien's greatest error. As an opponent, gladiators occupying the middle position in the huge, truly scary arena's personas with pulsating muscles and hideous attributes. All of them armed with armor and cutting-edge weaponry that could endure even the most deadly attacks, where some had scales covering them or exoskeletons were used by others as weapons that radiated strength and potential for breaking down everything in their path. The arena's champions were these, feared in innumerable conflicts and never losing for anyone who dared to confront them. They were born to fight for their whole lives, concentrated on the aggression of the stadium. In contrast to how the survivor appeared similar to a squashable insect, the audience from space looked below, watching with bated breath for the inescapable time when a human would succumb to these imposing extraterrestrials. But rather than being scared, The survivor examined each of the extraterrestrial champions, observing and evaluating their movements, closely their strengths and shortcomings, while he was still being laughed at by the throng. Already formulating his plan, the survivor's self-assurance did not originate from conceit, but based on years of expertise while fighting circumstances dictate survival appeared unattainable, that he had encountered lopsided odds each and every time he had prevailed in this arena, with its horrific champions and vicious reputation, was only another front in the conflict. Similar to him, and each battlefield he owned knew that Brut had battled on the survivor. Intelligence was not the only trait that correlated with strength. Agility and flexibility were equally significant, if not more so than the throng kept making fun of the survivor. He took up position in the middle of the arena. He disregarded the jeering sounds and the mocking glances and giggles from not one of that for the alien spectators. The fight was what really mattered. In front of the conflict that would demonstrate the power of humanity is not limited to the galaxy, but his personal focus was steadfastly letting go of the laughing will cease shortly. He would ensure that the survivor's objective was one as evidence that people were not helpless, that they did not seem delicate, and that they able to compete with he had the strongest fighters in the galaxy. Trained for this moment his entire life. And he was not going to allow the teasing to a throng diverts him from the work at. However, his rivals can be more powerful, quicker, and better equipped. But what survivor possessed that they didn't? A strong will and the capacity to adjust to every circumstance. The galactic arena has seen a great deal of fighting, yet something fresh would happen there today. A human warrior entered the scene today, the arena, and he was going to demonstrate the galaxy the reasons they ought to never underestimating how many people there may be on Earth currently chuckling, but at the end of they would be stunnedly observing the battle. Quiet, the survivor was prepared. First, the adversary from space was everything the audience from space anticipated. A towering, powerful behemoth has muscles that rippling beneath a heavy layer of organic protection. Triple the height of the plating, the extraterrestrial more closely resembled the human, more of a juggernaut than a rival. Sheer force emanated from its huge frame, and it has gained recognition in the field for smashing its rivals in a matter of seconds. Those who witnessed this horror live to tell the audience is completely cognizant of the story. Alien's devastating power was applauded. Eagerly anticipating and enjoying they felt that bloodshed was unavoidable. The name of the alien was not pronounceable in many human languages, but it had previously dubbed the Crusher by the intergalactic media for its quick and ruthless winds. It scarcely looked as it moved forward. The alien threat posed by the survivor, this person, was just a bothersome human, a delicate being that would fracture with one blow to its face twisted into an inhumane smile as it passed above the survivor. Mocking him with its verboten language, the alien motioned toward the throng, provoking more laughing as though to reassure them that this conflict would be, before the taunts even started, were the Crusher's unwavering pledge to make it quick, possibly even painless should despite human pleas for pity. The survivor kept calm, his gaze fixed on his thoughts. Evidently, he had heard this level of arrogance from both warlords and bullies in the past, knowing that conceit frequently resulted in errors, and this time the alien, its demise would come from overconfidence. The air was filled with applause from the crowd, strongly opposed to the entirety of human preparing to see his embarrassing defeat, but the survivor paid no attention. He devoted all of his attention to the insults, the conflict that lies ahead. When the conflict, the Crusher started up and rushed ahead. As it roared loudly, flinging its enormous arms resembling wrecking balls, every step it took made the ground quiver. The assembly bent forward in enthusiasm about seeing a person shattered under its feet, but the alien didn't expect to find survivor there. For him to possess lightning-fast reflexes, the survivor escaped the first blow, slipping beneath the alien's arm and moving aside to make room for the inexperienced. It may have appeared as the survivor was just trying to get away, escaping the inevitable, and the cosmic. The crowd erupted in laughter, certain that the person was just putting off his destiny. But there was no fear. Every dodge involved in the survivor's movements, each phase of Sid was determined using with precision. He examined his opponent, seeing how it adjusted the timing of its assaults, as well as the holes in its armor. The alien becoming increasingly irritated, swinging fiercely with each blow. By the second, the laughing of the throng was just inches away, started to stumble when they understood that instead of fleeing, the survivor was regulating the battle speed. The humans were responding not out of fear but unprepared. The Crusher became furious, and its failure to strike a blow started to it slammed with reckless abandonment, its fists into the earth. Shocking waves the survivor sent through the arena swung around every blow with his agility, with speed greater than the massive aliens. The gathering remained mostly still, delighted. But getting irritated now, they desired blood, they desired to witness despite the extraterrestrial. The survivor falls unrelenting attack on the human remnant unaffected. The laughter was dwindling, swapped out for confused murmuring. How could a weak human have survived thus long? Confronting a beast such as the Crusher, as the alien became more irate, increasing its attacks, grew increasingly frantic, it lunged at the surviving, its massive frame hurtling across the arena like a colossal beast, yet it was too consumed by mindless wrath to notice. How was its own momentum being applied? In contrast, the survivor had been in the lead, the foreigner, toward a particular area of the Argana, where there were uneven ground and the walls getting closer together. Throughout, the Crusher charged, sidestepping one of the survivors, finally resulting in the alien's crash, plunged headfirst into the massive stone wall of the arena's. Impact was enormous. The impact echoed with the Crusher's head. Its vision was briefly obscured by the amazement, stumbling as it attempted to reclaim its stepping. This was the beginning of the how long had survivor been waiting without pausing. He stepped in precisely. The survivor already had a deadly intent, discovered a gap in the alien's substantial armor immediately under the pit, where a thinner coating was present. With a swift, unambiguous blow, he drove his weapon in the weak spot, striking without going through the alien's natural barriers, puncturing its. The Crusher released a critical organ's roar, felt a roaring agony as it fell to the earth. Its enormous body quivering beneath the arena that had caused shock and agony, just now been enlivened by the roar of laughter and derision, collapsed into startled. The towering extraterrestrial, who had remained silent, predicted to crush the internal human seconds, were now vanquished and lying at the galactic spectators are the surviving. Too stunned to believe what they had just observers gazed with shock at the human who was previously thought to be nothing more a weakling with a W instead of an underdog. Nobody at that point disturbed the pundits who was promoting the Crusher's triumph prior to the conflict even starting were trying to interpret the result frantically. The audience throughout space, too shocked to say, while silently staring at the arena. What had occurred was how a human had a species that they had disregarded as feeble and frail overcame one of the most terrifying champions in the Whispers arena across space, distribute the jest among the throng. That earlier had the stadium full was displaced by a developing feeling of observed. The survivor's composure stepped over the fallen extraterrestrial. Inscrutable look. He didn't take pleasure in the triumph, did not bask in the glorification that other champions looked for him in order to, was only the start of his evidence. He was capable, but the fight was far away from earlier. There were more adversaries, obstacles that the survivor had to overcome, get away from the vanquished alien immediately. Readying for his next conflict, the spectators from space, still in shock after the horror started to whisper among, they had arrived to the arena themselves, anticipating to see a person crushed, anticipating amusement from a simple triumph for a champion among them, but rather, they had seen something totally unanticipated. The person had not only managed to survive, but had overcome of the most hazardous in the arena. Opponents' understanding of humanity in the arena throughout space had started to change. There was no longer any laughter, only a perhaps rising sense of uncertainty. Humanity was not as helpless as it once had been. Convinced that there might be more to than what was initially observed, and this human warrior maybe, just maybe, was merely beginning to enter the arena. Excitement erupted as the second adversary showed up on the scene. This, the foreign, was in sharp contrast to the brute who had before fallen. Crusher, the survivor with the technomancer identity. This extraterrestrial wasn't only physically powerful but also used cutting-edge devices that had provided it with a nearly faultless record in the galaxy arena. Towering life form covered with a halo of energy fields and technological improvements, Technomancer had won multiple games. Using a combination of physical might and it possessed technological superiority. Weaponry with the ability to destroy anything, shields that protected them during their route, almost unaffected by most physical yet assaults. The audience across space, still shaken by the first surviving triumph, patiently awaited the one to succumb to such overwhelming. The Technomancer, a technological powerhouse, armor shimmer ready for takeoff. Its eyes are attacked in the first wave. Fixed its belief on the survivor noticeable. In contrast to the first extraterrestrial, did not openly disparage humankind, the necessity of the extraterrestrial high-tech. The crowd clutched weapons that spoke for themselves. Its breath as the match started, anticipating, examined the possibility that humans could endure. The extraterrestrial didn't spend any time in this battle, starting right away with a flurry of blasts of plasma and energy-based missiles that totally target the survivor, anticipating the death of the person moments. But the survivor was prepared, as opposed to rushing in blindly or making an effort to engage the alien's weaponry directly. He fully exploited the arena's surface with swift, agile he ducked behind buildings in his moves, and impediments utilizing the surroundings as shield yourself from the plasma's attack. Energy beams and explosions ripped through not the walls or the earth, but the survivor moved with accuracy while remaining unaltered. And swiftness, though still clutching to its misgivings, saw the human avoiding every strike with almost impeccable timing. Confidence among the technomancer started to fade as it became aware that its strikes were being ineffective in spite of its superior weaponry, was unable to deliver even a single blow. Audience still getting used to the human initially. Victory started to whisper the survival's capacity to avoid such weaponry with cutting-edge technology was extraordinary, and many viewers started questioning whether this human even more hazardous than they would originally believed that each time the survivor seemed to be fired by a technomancer. Keeping one step ahead, avoiding obstacles, and squatting where the alien hadn't and hiding waiting for as the conflict raged on, the survivor initiated an analysis of the trends in the assaults. By technomancers, he observed slight lags between each explosion, gaps in the sequence of alien shooting that left it in addition to being vulnerable. The alien's dependence on technology caused it to survivor recognize that it was foreseeable. Each moment the technomancer was about to release a strong assault, there was a somewhat subtle, nearly undetectable flicker in its force blocks, a little window of vulnerability in a person's tactical reasoning formulated a plan swiftly, and the audience watched. Astonished as the survivor moved from dodging to confronting his opponent, applying his expertise, he started to lure the technomancer with his gains, causing the alien to overcommit to exert extra force during its assaults. Using each plasma barrage destroys, the alien's anger increased since it had anticipated the person to fall fast, but in reality it was being played with by the crowd's previous now. The laughing had become a combination of they gazed in shock and astonishment as the person adjusted to the combat, outwitting and outsmarting an adversary who was expected to be significantly, and at last. The survivor noticed his a certain opportunity after another violent string of assaults from the alien energy shields created by a technomancer flashed for a short while longer than his usual. Taking advantage of the survivor counterattacked, launching a carefully targeted missile at the weapon. Was the technomancer's chest. Hit its mark, identifying a vulnerability, and that interfered with the alien's armor. Sparks flew from the energy shields. Alien outfit as its weaponry became insufficient, keeping it exposed for the initial. The audience gasped during a battle. Harmony as they observed the unimaginable. The technomancer is an extraterrestrial outfitted with some of the most cutting-edge the galaxy's technology, was now attempting to recover control of its. The survivor did not waste any time on systems. He rendered inoperable with a last, deliberate blow the technomancer's residual barriers and smote the alien with a final strike. Its armor fell to the ground, flaring and breaking down as the humans once triumphed in the arena overflowed with the sound of giggles, and the galaxy jeers were suddenly dead silent. Speculators who had been assured foreseeing the death of humans in a matter of moments hard to come up with terms. People unable to comprehend what they had just saw. The person who was formerly written off as flimsy and feeble had now overcome two of the most formidable foes in the arena, and the triumph this time wasn't accidental, was the outcome of meticulous planning, flexibility, and tactical skill. For the first time, the magnificent audience started to view the survivor differently. He wasn't only an oddity or in the human being's underdog to be laughed at, demonstrated that he is a skilled strategist able to overcome adversaries who were a way surpassed him in terms of size, power, and technology. Caused a perspective shift that was the crowd of bettors felt it strongly against the person who is now being monitored. They were filled with both amazement and horror. Became aware that this person wasn't just not only surviving but also prospering, and the survivor was standing above his fallen foe. A murmur started among the spectators themselves. A few expressed incredulity, others discreetly acknowledged their reverence for human talent, and the cosmic observers who had been so certain victory now acknowledged the alien's human creativity and fast thinking. The laughter that had enveloped the arena earlier was gone and was replaced with a feeling of stress. As they failed to see the survivor, they saw him as a humorous sideshow. As a bona fide candidate for the championship, the arena that formerly mocked Earth now, as a lesser species, acknowledged the person as a potential danger. The climb up the ranks for the survivor was not by chance. He had outwitted each adversary, employing craft and strategy to defeat the challenges, and the galaxy, which had originally looked down on humanity, now, anxiously anticipating, they pondered who could possibly stop him. The human war warrior, if anyone could, had demonstrated that the power of Earth lay not using sophisticated technology or brutal force, but in the capacity for flexibility and outsmarting even the most lethal adversaries. With the survivor was evolving with every victory. How the galaxy perceived his kind, what had once been a joke, has now become the stuff of legend in the creating planetary audience once so certain of the human frailty, now terrified of what would occur when the survivor faced his subsequent opponent. Would they see another one? Astonishing victory, or had the person met his match at last? But one thing was definite, that the survivor was no longer a once the underdog. He was becoming more and more of the whole galaxy, as well as the cosmic arena was observing. Curious to see what would occur after the last adversary in the galactic arena, the survivor faced was not your typical rival. It was the champion in the reins. A terrifying extraterrestrial referred to as the Apex. The Apex has never defeated. Far from it. It stood as perhaps the greatest entity in the galaxy, tremendous strength, unparalleled speed, and intelligence that has been toughened by combat body, was an awful combination of agility and strength, which are covered in adaptive skin and bio-enhanced armor that moved to thwart any approaching danger. Not only did this alien prevail in combat, destroyed opponents with a merciless effectiveness, the whole galaxy maintained its breathing. As the survivor entered, no one in the arena for the final showdown could no longer recall the trip he had taken to attain the stage, defeating each opponent using a mix of tactical genius and strategy. As well as he presented the doubts to the Apex. Come back for a lot of people in the throng. Could a man really cannot defeat such a flawless? The commentators from the galaxy, warrior wild conjecture, unclear about how there would be a fight. Some spectators remained steadfast in their conviction that human was an accident, that this decisive battle would finish the same way it has innumerable times. Others who had the audacity to confront the Apex, however, a rising percentage of their prior long silenced hopes and laughs once again, the underdog would triumph. Apex didn't pretend to underestimate. Unlike other opponents, the survivor didn't make fun of or abuse humans. The Apex was an expert strategy. And it was aware of it. This person deserved to be in the last game. The Apex witnessed the intellect concealed from view by humans, and that was enough to earn respect. But the champion maintained a calm confidence in knowing that its history of playing without a loss wasn't a coincidence. Had previously examined the survivor's fights and thought it had previously explained his ruses and maneuvers. This would not be a battle of strength. By itself, it would be a test of flexibility, tolerance, and sharpness of mind. As soon as the conflict started, it was obvious that this would be the most difficult battle the head survivor ever encountered. The Apex moved, closing the gap at a dizzying speed. Instantaneously, its strikes between them accurate and deadly. With every step, the countermove or dodge was made by survivor. Greeted by an even quicker answer from the extraterrestrial champion, Apex was not just physically stronger, but also extremely intelligent. As though the Apex were able to predict each action, the survivor would take away his tactics nearly completely the moment they were put into action. The human found in the arena for the first time really defensive. About the audience observed a strong silence between each blow and a counterattack that causes the observers. The tremendous speed of the peak and strength seemed unmatched. And it seemed for a brief while that the at last survivor had found his equal. A worldwide audience, but with divisions, felt the strain of combat. Every momentum carried the possibility of not the human to fall, but the one who survived. Despite the Apex's apparent resistance, utilized its advantage. The liver refused to give up lightly since he was faster. More so than before, more acute than he had ever been. Suits, but the distance between him and the longer the battle, the more superior continued. The more apparent it was that it wouldn't be sufficient to use force alone. To the human race's constant pursuit of the Apex, each time a survivor attempted to land a strike, the winner responded with stunning pace, at which the warriors from humans' motions that were previously so flawless. Matches now appeared tense, as he strained to stay ahead of the alien's tremendous skill. It was a fight of the survivor realized he was attrition could not just outlive the Apex. He required an alternative tactic. Then something moved the survivor around on the protective, started noticing trends in the extraterrestrial fighting method used by Apex. Style was so polished and elegant that it had grown to have such a delicate rhythm. Only a person who had been forced to the Apex's limit was able to identify it. Motions, but lightning fast, came next. A series of attack methods, each intended to overwhelm adversaries without wiggle room, but the survivor's tactical mind became fixated on this rhythm. He had learned from his training to adjust, to identify flaws in even the finest perfect systems. As the Apex got ready for an additional terrible sequence of strikes, the survivor started interfering with, rather than responding to its rhythm, anticipating the Apex's assaults. He began interrupting the battle's progress, timing and traveling in unexpected directions, his counters in a manner that compelled the Apex to set the alien up for the initial. The game hesitated at a moment. It had never confronted a foe capable of causing its expertly developed fighting style, with each going second to the survivors. The apex was forced to make erratic maneuvers. Recalibrating its approach, the galaxy spectators become aware of what was going on. The human beings leaned forward in their seats. Was finding the impossibility to be done, a method to surpass the apex's defenses. Not too long after the survivor noticed his chance amid one of the forceful charges from the peak person sidestepped at the ideal moment, the alien unable to hit its target and lose its equilibrium for a brief moment. That was all the survivor required at that point. The survivor moved with exquisite agility. Closely utilizing the fleeting opportunity in the Supreme Court's defenses, he made a targeted attack to the alien's lower body. The location of its adaptive armor least powerful strike that stopped the champion's improved reaction times, leaving the survivor exposed, and the apex proceeded with an immediate, decisive assault with the alien's own velocity. The apex was taken by surprise by it. And it seemed for a brief while that the, at last, survivor had found his equal. A worldwide audience, but with divisions, felt the strain of combat. Every momentum carried the possibility of not the human to fall, but the one who survived. Despite the apex's apparent resistance, utilized its advantage. The liver refused to give up lightly since he was faster. More so than before, more acute than he had ever been suits, but the distance between him and the longer the battle, the more superior continued. The more apparent it was that brute it wouldn't be sufficient to use force alone. To the human race's constant pursuit of the apex, each time a survivor attempted to land a strike, the winner responded with stunning pace, at which the warriors from humans' motions that were previously so flawless. Matches now appeared tense, as he strained to stay ahead of the alien's tremendous skill. It was a fight of the survivor realized he was attrition could not just outlive the apex. He required an alternative tactic. Then something moved the survivor around on the protective, started noticing trends in the extraterrestrial fighting method used by apex style was so polished and elegant that it had grown to have such a delicate rhythm. Only a person who had been forced to the apex's limit was able to identify it. Motions, but lightning fast, came next. A series of attack methods, each intended to overwhelm adversaries without wiggle room, but the survivor's tactical mind became fixated on this rhythm. He had learned from his training to adjust, to identify flaws in even the finest perfect systems. As the apex got ready for an additional terrible sequence of strikes, the survivor started interfering with, rather than responding to its rhythm, anticipating the apex's assaults. He began interrupting the battle's progress, timing and traveling in unexpected directions his counters in a manner that compelled the apex to set the alien up for the initial. The game hesitated at a moment. It had never confronted a foe capable of causing its expertly developed fighting style, with each going second to the survivors. The apex was forced to make erratic maneuvers. Recalibrating its approach, the galaxy spectators become aware of what was going on. The human beings leaned forward in their seats. Was finding the impossibility to be done, a method to surpass the apex's defenses. Not too long after the survivor noticed his chance amid one of the forceful charges from the peak person sidestepped at the ideal moment, the alien unable to hit its target and lose its equilibrium for a brief moment. That was all the survivor required at that point. The survivor moved with exquisite agility. Closely utilizing the fleeting opportunity in the Supreme Court's defenses, he made a targeted attack to the alien's lower body. The location of its adaptive armor least powerful strike that stopped the champion's improved reaction times, leaving the survivor exposed, and the apex proceeded with an immediate, decisive assault with the alien's own velocity. The apex was taken by surprise by it. The unanticipated change in strategy failed, reversing and marking the first instance in its career. It collapsed to the stage. The apex suddenly fell silent and startled. The unbeaten champion of the universe arena has been reduced to rubble by it in front of the human. The survivor lost victory, despite his chest aching from the exertion. His focus restored. The galaxy commentators, who had been telling the story of battle with growing fervor, where the crowd was temporarily stunned, certain that the person had no chance, suddenly looked on in shock as the survivor lifted his head, triumphantly holding the ultimate strike dealt to the apex. Overcoming the former invincible champion had not been defeated by sheer force or enhanced technology created by humans' durability, flexibility, and tactical. The arena that had begun was brilliant, now packed with jeers and laughter and reverence and amazement at the galaxy audience had previously been so confident in. The inadequacy of humanity was made to reevaluate everything they previously believed. They was aware that the survivor had carried out unthinkable. He had vanquished the greatest. As the survivor, warrior in the galaxy, towered over the arena's center, cheers broke out from the throng. prior reservations now forgotten, the once the derided person was now the leader of his path from underdog in the galactic arena after the completion of Legend. The galaxy would never view people in the same manner, once more demonstrating that the survivor tactic intelligence and robustness could triumph over the strongest opponents.